Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. Thanks for joining me. Today I want to talk about digital IDs. The government just backed down on mandatory digital ID. Nearly 3 million people signed a petition saying no. It became the fourth largest petition in UK history. And just a few weeks ago, in January 2026, the government effectively abandoned the mandatory aspects. Of course, that feels like a win, but here's what most people missed. They didn't abandon digital IDs. They just made it optional for now. Because once the infrastructure exists, optional becomes mandatory without anyone having to pass a new law. I'm Ben Parry, and today I want to explain why digital ID isn't just a policy debate. It's the most important infrastructure decision the UK will make this century. Not as a policy, not as a political fight, but as infrastructure. Because once identity becomes programmable, the relationship between you, the citizen, and the state changes permanently. This isn't about trusting or distrusting a particular government. It's about understanding what kind of systems we're building and what those systems inevitably enable. I believe in decentralization. I believe in limiting power structures, not because people are always bad, but because power tends to grow and systems tend to outlast intentions. This is not ideology, it's history. For most of human history, identity was passive. You proved who you were when required. A passport at a border, a license when driving, a signature on a form. Identity didn't follow you. It didn't monitor you. It didn't evaluate you continuously. Crucially, identity was not infrastructure. You presented identification in specific contexts for specific purposes, and then you walked away. The interaction ended. Digital ID changes that fundamentally, because once identity becomes digital, it becomes machine readable, programmable, enforceable at scale. And that's not an upgrade. That's a transformation. When the government frames digital ID as simpler onboarding or faster verification, they're describing convenience, but what they're building is controlled infrastructure. So here's my thinking. Infrastructure doesn't ask permission. It shapes behavior. Roads decide where cities grow. Networks decide how information flows. Payment rails decide who can transact. And identity infrastructure decides who can access what, under what conditions, and whether that access can be revoked. Once identity is digital, access becomes conditional. Permissions quietly replace rights. Enforcement becomes automatic. This is why digital ID never stays just ID. It becomes the control layer that everything else plugs into. Think about how this works in practice. Right now, you need ID to open a bank account. With digital ID, the bank doesn't just verify you once, they will be able to verify you continuously. Your access to your own money becomes a conditional layer on your identity status remaining valid. And who decides what valid means? Not you. The system does. This isn't paranoia, this is architecture. Systems don't care about intentions, they only care about capabilities. Now add facial recognition. Not hypothetically. Right now, the Met Police are using live facial recognition in shopping districts across London. In 2023 and 2024, the technology was deployed at the coronation and major public events. It's being trialled at train stations, and it's being discussed for age verification in shops and pubs. The trajectory is very clear. Facial recognition means identity without consent. Identification at a distance. Identification without interaction. You don't present ID, your face is the ID. And when these systems are wrong, and they will be, the burden shifts onto the individual to prove the system made a mistake. That's not a technical problem. That's a power imbalance. When this was raised in Parliament, the response focused on error rates, compensation, future safeguards, and consultations, of course. But those are the wrong questions. The real question is, should this capability exist at all? Because once it exists, it will be used, not just for the original purpose, but for every purpose it can be used for. That's how infrastructure works. Now connect this to AI. In my last video, I explained how the Online Safety Act mandates client-side scanning. If you don't know what that is, I'd encourage you to go and check out that video. But basically, it's AI that watches what you write before you send it. Now imagine that same AI connected to your digital ID. Not just scanning messages, scanning behavior, scoring patterns, flagging intent, all linked to who you are. AI is not just another admin tool. It is the first technology capable of observing behavior continuously, interpreting patterns and intent, making decisions at scale. When AI is connected to digital ID, facial recognition, behavioral data, you don't get efficiency, you get automated judgment. And this is why when we built Whisper AI, we made one non-negotiable choice: no servers, no cloud, no observation, because AI that requires you to send your thoughts to someone else's computer is not sovereign AI. It's rented intelligence. And rented intelligence can be monitored. It can be linked to identity and used to build the exact scoring systems I'm describing. This ties directly to something I've said on this channel before. I don't trust systems that require permanent trust to function. Cloud AI already demands trust. Digital ID demands trust. AI-driven enforcement makes that trust unavoidable. And mandatory trust is not freedom. It's compliance by design. Now let's add one more piece to the puzzle: money. Digital ID is not being built in isolation. It is being discussed alongside central bank digital currencies. And this isn't speculation. The Bank of England is actively developing a digital pound. They frame it as modernisation, of course, as improving financial inclusion, as making payments more efficient. But CBDCs don't just digitise money. They make money programmable, conditional, revocable. Look at what's already happening in China with the digital yuan. The system already allows transaction limits based on social credit scores, spending restrictions in certain categories, money that expires if not spent. When the UK government says they're exploring CBDCs to improve financial inclusion, remember, infrastructure doesn't care about intentions, only cares about capabilities. When identity, behaviour and money are linked, control becomes total. Access to services, ability to transact, participation in society, all mediated through a single identity layer. Unfortunately, that's not science fiction, that's architecture. And once that architecture exists, the question of should we use it this way becomes irrelevant, because it will be used every way it can be used. So here's the part that often gets ignored. This is not the only way to build digital infrastructure. We already have working alternatives. Bitcoin proved that money can exist without central control, without permission. For 16 years, Bitcoin has operated with zero downtime, no CEO, no central authority. It works because the architecture doesn't require trust. It requires verification. And that same principle can apply to identity, to AI, to digital infrastructure in general. Blockchains like Cardano and Midnight are building decentralized governance systems, privacy-preserving computation, identity systems without central ownership, where you control your credentials, not a government database. And this matters because it proves the issue is not technology. It's a design choice. Centralized systems choose control. Decentralized systems choose resilience. When the government says digital ID is necessary for modern life, what they really mean is the centralized version we're building is necessary for the control infrastructure we want. The decentralized alternatives already exist. They're just not politically convenient. Let me be very clear. This is not about one government. It's not about one party. And it's not about today's intentions. I genuinely believe most people involved in designing these systems have good intentions. They want to reduce fraud. They want to improve efficiency. They want to protect vulnerable people. But here's the problem. History shows us something uncomfortable. Some power structures are built by bad people. Most are simply inherited by them. If a system only works as long as the right people are in charge, it is not a safe system. The question isn't, do you trust this government? The real question is, would you trust the system if the worst government you can imagine controlled it? If the answer is no, then the system is the problem. Once identity becomes programmable, permission quietly replaces freedom. And once that shift happens, it does not reverse. So this is why it's more important than ever for people to take responsibility, for you to take responsibility for your own digital lives. If you value privacy, if you value freedom of thought, autonomy, then how you use your devices matters. Where your data is processed matters. Whether systems observe you by default matters. Whether tools require trust matters. Start moving your digital life towards systems you control. Use end-to-end encrypted messages. Use decentralized money like Bitcoin, which is free from manipulation by governments. Use tools that process locally instead of sending your data to the cloud. This is exactly why we built Whisper AI, not as another assistant, but as a private AI. AI that runs locally, AI that works offline, AI that doesn't observe, record, or report cognition. An operating system for the individual, an operating system for you. Not centralized intelligence, and we're about to open source the entire code base, so you don't have to trust us. You can verify. Because as we know, verification, not trust, is how resilient systems work. So I think it's really important to have a clear understanding that digital ID is not just an identity system. It's the connective tissue between surveillance, enforcement, money, and behavior. And of course, once it exists, everything plugs into it. The infrastructure is being built right now. The petition has succeeded in delaying mandatory ID, but optional is just the first phase. Once enough people adopt it for convenience, and I've done another video about this, once enough services require it, once the infrastructure is normalized, it stops being optional without anyone having to pass a new law. The time to choose your tools, your money, and your digital sovereignty is now. Make that choice before the choice is made for you. So thanks for watching, guys. I really appreciate it. If you care about these ideas, share this video with someone who needs to understand what's actually being built. And if you want to learn about sovereign AI, you control or check it out. Check out, obviously, Whisper AI. I'll pop the link below. The architecture we build today will determine the freedom we have tomorrow. So choose carefully, guys. Stay safe, stay sovereign, and of course, stay free. All right. Lots of love.